Alrighty, so I guess it's time to get started. It's our Security Plus Day, and we will be focusing primarily on Security Plus and the concepts that you're going to be seeing and responsible for in preparing for this exam. If you are not preparing for Security Plus, you may want to attend a different session. Some of these concepts may be a little advanced if you haven't reached this point yet, but there's at the same time, there are other concepts that kind of tie into some of the other exams like network security, ports and protocols, secure versus unsecure, things like that are things that you start to see in some of the other exams. So just because you're not necessarily taking Security Plus or preparing for Security Plus doesn't mean that there aren't concepts here that can help you in the exam that you're taking. So it just kind of depends on how the stuff ties in. But with that said, the main focus today is going to be security. So before we get started, so anyone here who's taken this exam recently that kind of has a take on it, a summary or outlook, one of those things? No, you know what, Don? The student orientation actually got moved to another day. That's not on Thursdays anymore. I believe it's on Wednesdays. I have to get with Beth because we changed that schedule. Got an email that it was today. Really? How many others put on? Alrighty. Net Plus. Yeah. Well, there's concepts that tie into both. Okay. So I just took what do you call it? A plus 1002 yesterday. And for those of you that don't know, the 1002 is where you actually get your introduction into security. So I saw quite a bit on social engineering, identifying malware, troubleshooting steps. What else? Network security, right? Problems with network security. Troubleshooting tools, right? Which tools are you going to use in certain situations? So that's why I was saying that before. There are a lot of concepts in the other exams that do kind of tie into this stuff here, particularly the second A plus exam, because that's where you get your introduction into security. But anyway, so with that said, this exam, there's a ton of terminology that you need to be prepared for. You need to make sure that you know and you understand. First and foremost, one thing that does tie into a lot of other exams would be ports and protocols. Okay, so by the time you're at Security Plus, you want to make sure that you not only know which port numbers are associated with which protocols, but you want to know which ones are using protocols that are considered secure versus the ones that are considered unsecure. Prime example would be Telnet and Secure Shell. Okay. Two protocols that do the same thing. One is considered safe, one isn't. Or secure, I'm sorry. One is considered secure and one isn't. That's the type of stuff that you want to start to instill in your knowledge base once you move to Sec Plus. Your encryption technologies, that's another one, right? So your WEP versus your WPA versus your WPA2. Now it's important to understand, okay, which one will be considered the most secure, which one is using TKIP and, which one is using AES, which one is preferred. That type of stuff starts to become important when you get to Security Plus. So just want to make sure that I stress that. A lot more terminology here than troubleshooting. Even though you will still see troubleshooting, you won't see as much as you're going to see on Net Plus, for instance. Net Plus, troubleshooting has its own knowledge domain. Here, they just kind of sprinkle it in um, within all these concepts, but you don't see troubleshooting as its own knowledge domain. So this exam is definitely more about terminology, understanding the concepts, right? Security concepts versus troubleshooting, something you'll see more of in Net Plus. Any particular questions? This is a huge exam. There's a ton of information here, so I don't want to just pick an area and start going there. But for instance, like this stuff here, your social engineering, this is all stuff that you start to see in the 1002, right? I got quite a few questions on this on my exam yesterday on a lot of these concepts here. Not as many. There's a lot fewer on the 1002, but all this stuff right here it's all review. Actually, just the stuff up here is review, and then there's obviously there's going to be more right here. Obviously, this is review 2. If you've taken Net Plus, this is where you're going to get a lot of your review there. So this is like A+ review up here, and then down here we're talking about technologies and tools, firewalls, and your routers and switches and stuff. This should all be reviewed, especially if you've taken and passed Net Plus. Let's see. Kelly said struggle with keeping some of the terms straight. Wellman versus Spearfish. Yeah. Luckily, that type of stuff is just kind of about, doing what you have to do to instill it, to figure out what's the difference between fishing and spearfishing versus fishing, right? There's a ton of them. Some of them are easy to pick out, like, dumpster diving, tailgating, right? Impersonation, shoulder surfing, like this type of stuff kind of speaks for itself. And this will actually help you on the exam. If they give you one about, say that they give you one about spearfishing, and they throw in dumpster diving and shoulder surfing, and well, then in that instance, if they have some of the ones that are easy to identify in there, and also easy to eliminate them, which is definitely good for the exam. So, yeah, that one's easy to remember because you have the V. So you just make the V with voice. Someone asked that. Okay, sorry about that. Renee nailed it right there, right? Yeah, Whalen is going to be, if you're Whalen, then you're going at someone with big credentials, right? You're going at like a big fish. So, like a CEO, right? President, right? Chairman of a board, or somebody with a fancy name. Right? That kind of separates Whalen from others. So, there's always something, and a lot of the times, well, most of the time, I saw it a lot on the exam yesterday, and I do mention this a lot in some of the other sessions, but there's always a key word in there that will give you an idea of, which one they're pointing at. So as long as you can find those, you should be good. Yeah, I mean, and that's the thing about this exam. It's just the terminology is all over. There's just a ton of it, more than I don't want to say more than A+, because there's a ton of terminology in A+2, which is why they split it into 2 exams. But this exam here, they almost could have done the same thing because it's just so much. There's so many concepts and things, which is good that you get exposed to this stuff. You get at least the basics of it in some of the earlier exams. So it makes it so that you're not picking up all this stuff right off the bat. Some of it is, this stuff you'll see in A+2, right? So it's good to see some of the familiar stuff, because when you move on to some of the others, it can be overwhelming, definitely. Give me just a second. Okay, so it says dumpster diving. It's like what the Chicago Bears front office did. Okay. All right. Yeah. Here's my advice. Okay. This stuff, like the social engineering stuff, is going to be the give me's. Okay. Make sure that you have that stuff down, because anytime I'm taking an exam and I see like a social engineering question, I just kind of give a sigh of relief, because I feel like this, along with like port questions and things like that, this is one exam where you can do a decent amount of memorization. Can't really do a lot of it on like Net Plus or A Plus, just because of the way the questions are presented. But there's so many terms and terminology and acronyms used on this exam that it does kind of help to memorize as much as this type of stuff as you can. All right. So however you can get that done is, I definitely recommend it. I do flashcards when I can, or I just kind of look at it until I remember it, I guess. But flashcards are definitely more effective, because you're not only looking at something, but you're writing it. So, right. And then read it after you write it. Read it, then write it. Read it or write it and remember it. Okay. Did marathon sessions of CSI Cyber. Oh, okay. You hear a lot of the same terms there as well, I would imagine. Okay, so let me come back up here real quick. Trying to remember the gist of Security Plus. It's been a while since I've taken it, so you have to bear with me. Identity access management, technologies and tools, cryptography, PKI, public key infrastructure. I'm going to scroll down to the bottom. If you guys have any questions, just ask them. We'll just go from there. I'm looking for something pertinent. So you can see here, there's a ton of acronyms. You got AES, DES, 3DES, right? These can be kind of hard to keep up with on this exam, for sure. So just keep in mind, there's a list at the bottom that'll map out all of these for you. You get down to the bottom, past the last objective, which is 6.4. Just a huge acronym list. So when you come across those that you're not sure what it is, what it's used for, just scroll down to the bottom and make sure that you write it out, put it on the flashcard or something so you can study it. Let's see what else. Actually, I want to go to this security section here. So he's asking, what makes this version harder than the previous? You have buddies that have been in IT for 10 years and they can't pass. No, I can't say. This one, in comparison to the last one, so the last one, it was more difficult than the one before that. I will definitely concede that. Okay, the 301 was, to me, it was a lot easier than the 401. Okay. This one, I can't really say for sure. I mean, one, I haven't taken the exam yet, but the other thing is, when I go through the objectives, I mean, I don't notice a lot that's been changed. So from the previous version, and as hard as it was harder than the first, but I was able to pass. So this one, is pretty. I don't even really want to say it's that well rounded. You have a couple heavy areas, then you have a middle area, then you have a couple not so heavy areas. So it is pretty well rounded, but I don't know. I think it's probably the amount of information, because when I look at the old study guides to the 401, for instance, it's nowhere near as big as the study guides are for this version. So I think they've kind of expanded on the terminology for this exam. Just makes you responsible for more. The recommended experience is 2 years, so I don't think that's changed, with a focus on security. So this exam is designed for people that are already been in the field for a couple of years already. So they speak the language pretty well. The acronyms they know pretty well. The concepts, they probably applied them, seen a lot of this stuff first person, as opposed to just coming into the field and trying to learn all this stuff at once without any prior experience. So I mean, that'll put most people at a disadvantage. I can't say why your buddies are struggling with the exam. I actually have to get in there and take it, but I was actually going to do something different for this version, because what I was going to do is, there's a new way to recert using CertMaster that started, I believe it started last year, either last year or the year before. And so what I wanted to do is, I wanted to utilize that method to recert this time, as opposed to taking the exam. So I don't even know if I'm going to take this exam. I may take it anyway. But to answer your question, I don't know. I don't know what makes it harder. What I can tell you is, so from my first run-in with CompTIA, it wasn't that bad of an experience, except for my first exam. I just, I didn't put the time in necessary. I didn't do what I was supposed to do, so I had a bad exam experience. But after that, everything was kind of straightforward. But what I noticed is, when they updated the exams after my first run through, one of the biggest changes that they made was troubleshooting. They put a lot more troubleshooting on the exam. So A+, Net+, those exams definitely got an upgrade when it came to troubleshooting. This exam, not so much, but I think they just threw a lot more terminology in here. So maybe that's what it is that makes it a lot more difficult. But the other thing that I've heard from people that have taken it is, there's a lot of output that you're asked to interpret. And most people, I mean, you're not going to be able to interpret something if you haven't looked at it once or twice before, right? Just regular syntax or output from something like, I don't know, like Wireshark or, Packet Sniffer or something like that. If they ask you to, read the output of like a firewall or something like that, if you haven't done that before, then it's going to kind of, more than likely, it's going to be something that's over your head, or you're going to struggle with it. So that's another thing that I've heard is people seeing output and syntax that they haven't seen before, and it's hard to interpret it. So I don't know if it's higher than it was last time. I think it's the same, to be honest with you. 750 sounds about right. It sounds like it was, I think it was 750 last time too. I could be wrong, but I know A plus is a little bit more lenient. It's like you need a 675 for the first one, and then the second one, you need a 700, I think. Net plus is probably somewhere around along the lines of 720, 725. When I could come here and be for sure. But as far as I know, I don't think they changed that. I think they just added more. There's a lot more terminology and stuff there. So net plus is 720. So as you progress, your passing score goes up for some reason. And I guess they want you to understand more. So I mean that may be another thing. You have to get a higher percentage of questions right for this exam. Not versus the previous version, but versus some of the other exams like the Net Plus or A Plus. So yeah, that's something else. Kelly's right. That equates to like a little over like 80%, like 83%, something like that. So it's definitely higher than A plus and Net Plus. They expect you to understand, to answer these at a higher at a higher rate than the other exams. So that'll make it a little bit more difficult too. Well, I think the questions are always vague. I've been A plus certified since 2013. Okay, since the end of 2013, and I'm taking this exam yesterday. I'm sitting here looking at questions like, what are they asking me? Right? It shouldn't be like that anymore. It's the same feeling that I had when I was just learning this stuff for the first time. And so, that's just something that they do. It's the way that they word questions, and the longer you're around the field, and the more experience you get, the more the stuff makes sense to you. But CompTIA just finds a way to throw like random left field questions at you. Sometimes it's hard to get what they're getting at. So, the vagueness is something that you can't escape it. It may not have seemed vague to you last time, but it probably was. It just wasn't as vague as it was this time. But, that's something that I noticed from my first exam. It's hard to really understand what they're getting at. Even the 401, there were a lot of questions on that exam that had me scratching my head. It wasn't just the way that they answered it, it's the way that they presented the question, and then you have, A, B, C, and D, and A, B, and C could all be right. And it's like, okay, well, which one is more right? You have to go back to the question, and then you'll see, okay, it says which one of these would work best, or which one of these is most likely, or which one should you try first, right? And that's what kind of separates, even on A plus, Net plus security, it doesn't matter which one. That's what kind of separates the one that they're looking for from the other ones that look like they could be right too. It's some key word up there. So you have to, whenever you see those type of questions, just go back and look. CertMaster tougher than A plus and Net plus, a lot wordier. Yeah, that's something that you should get used to. I was actually surprised because, I guess I'm comparing, A plus and security because I just took it, but, it wasn't. I got a lot of questions that weren't as wordy as I was expecting yesterday. It was a lot more to the point, which I definitely appreciated. But then there were some that were just like, all right, what are you talking about? What is all this, blah, blah, blah. So, get some information on outputs. The best way to get information on outputs is to get the outputs, right? So download something that's going to let you see them. Okay. For example, if you're preparing for the 1002, right? There's a lot of command line questions on there, so you can just go to the command line and you take a look at a lot of stuff, right? I could go CMD, right? And I could type some stuff in here, and I could get a look at the output, see what it looks like, all right? Things like that. So that's what I recommend doing, is getting your hands on the software that's going to create, that's going to give you the output. So what I'll do is scroll down to the bottom, past the acronym list. And you'll see the software tools and software tools and software tools. All right, tools, and tools. So there's some down here that I would recommend that you download. Wireshark being one of them. Kdenable. You should spend some time looking at your firewall. I'm not saying make any changes to it, but take a look at it and just kind of get an idea for not just what's back here, or what options you have at your disposal, but all connections. But some of the other options that are back here as well, right? Like, what are some of the things that you can do under advanced settings and things like that? This is what you need to spend some time doing. So the outputs on you certify. Yeah, I haven't seen those, so I want to be able to say for sure. Mike, absolutely. If there's anything about the exam that you wanted to go, excuse me, anything about the exam that you want to talk about or go over, as as far as like giving a heads up goes, or things like that, just don't be too specific about any questions, because we are recording.
Yeah, I won't be. I don't think I can actually. I'm almost like I took it on the 1st of July, but there's a couple things I wanted to point out. Just that when you do the CertMaster prep, they're going to be. I think they give you a little bit more. I know it looks a little bit vague on their end on that, but when you get the test question, like I was saying last week. So for instance, I think there is one about like you're a system administrator and you want to. You want your employees or your workforce to access systems using a secured method or credentials. So I knew as soon as I saw the credentials, I was like, okay, what is this? But when you get to the answers, it'll be like one was on policies, so it's nothing to do with policies. They like 2 or 3 of them were policies, and then one was like install security cameras. And then the other one was implement biometric readers, like stuff like that. And I was like, okay, well, the only thing I can, personally do is the biometric readers. So like when you see questions like that, but you're gonna get to like where you're like, oh, these two, but what would I actually put on here? Because you're thinking like I had to get out. The first time I took the test, I had to get outside my own head of working in the military, because I'm like, oh, we got the biometric readers, but they're like the fingerprint scanners, but they're disabled. But I was like, I can't add one of those. I guess I could go, but I wasn't thinking, oh, I can go purchase one. So I went back through the training, and Jason mentions it in his training, and then it was also in the book. But I had kind of like bleeped over it because I'm like, oh, I kind of know this stuff already. I know what I would implement, but I kind of hurt myself on that, because when it came up to that, I was like, oh, well, if it comes down to like 2 different things you can put on, like one was a CAT card, and one was the biometric readers. And as soon as I wasn't thinking, it's like, oh, the CAT card, it's got certificates, but that's actually not what they meant. So I'm 100% sure I got that one wrong, because when I went back through CertMaster, the question was there with almost the same wording, but not identical. And then the other question I saw was about the outputs on information. The best thing you can kind of do is go in and do the Wireshark, Kdenable, all those tools that you'd be on a network. But when you do them, don't just like, I kind of like breezed through them the first time because I've already played with them. But the way that you certify gives you the output and kind of makes you like, you'll see it highlights it. You're going to be looking for that. All they're going to do is give you one line of code. It's going to be like, you were doing a scan on a network and you noticed this output. What is the possible attack that is happening? And I was like, when I saw it, I was like, oh man, well, this could be 2 or 3 of these attacks, but they're not here. They weren't on the thing at all. So that's why I said, look at those outputs, because when I went back and did uCertify again, I was like, oh, I didn't think about this. You know, here it is. It's one line of code, but it wasn't something I put in. It was something that they had highlighted. And when I took the training, I was like, what? Why is this highlighted? What does that have anything to do? Because if you guys notice, when you go through uCertify, it doesn't kind of like tell you what it's about. It's just like, hey, go through this. And if you get it all done, it's like, hey, good, check mark, you're complete. But does it? I don't think it explains the way it should. So when you see the outputs and they have like the boxes around the outputs, pay attention to that. And also, I would tell you, memorize what those output strings look like. Like if it has 4 lines that it outputs, like, you know, normally it'll be like destination source. And then the line after that is going to tell you kind of what's going on. That's what you got to memorize, because you're not going to, the destination source is going to be bleeped out. It's just going to give you the 3rd line of what the output would be. And they kind of want you to know exactly what that would be. I'm trying to think what else was a good one. Oh, the other thing is no RAID. So one hands-on question where I had to set up the RAID configurations was on there, and it got to like RAID 6, and I was like, okay, I kind of know how this gets set up. It's almost identical to, you know, RAID 5. We're just adding one more thing. But the catch to it was I didn't know what each RAID configuration should go with. So it'd be like an authentication server. I'm trying to think what the other one was. There was a couple of them. Hold on, let me think. I think it was email, like authentication. It might have been like a workstation. Oh, it was media. I remember the media one, because that's an easy one. That's always RAID 0, because you don't want nothing to go down. And then there was authentication, and I want to say finance or something else, but I didn't know what any of those were. I was like, okay, I don't know what these would go. The other 3, I had no clue. I was like, out of these, you know, 4, I don't know where they go. I knew how to set up all the RAID configurations, but know what the RAID configuration should be primarily used for, because I sure did not know what that was. I'm trying to think what else, Trish, that I had like said it. Oh yeah, you already hit on it. Just know Keen Enable. I got a lot of questions on Keen Enable, but you got to know the outputs, or you got to know why you would use it. Because I would use something else, you know, like I would have something else in my head when I saw the outputs, but they focused a lot on whatever is in the beginning. That's the other catch. I didn't catch it on the first test, but you guys know how like Net Plus, A Plus, when you go in, you get that little copyright notice, like, well, we're using Wireshark in this test, and it'll have listed, but I didn't notice the first time. It actually changes. So if your test doesn't have one of those companies or copyrights in it, it won't be on that little banner when it pops up for you to acknowledge that you understand that those are copyright material. The second time I went to take it, I was like, hey, they're different. And then, of course, I had to take it a 3rd time because I missed by 2 or 3 points. But I noticed, I was like, oh, man. So as soon as I saw that, when I got to those questions, I actually was able to, like, 10 questions. I was like, oh, I know it's not this, because it wasn't. The more I thought about it, it's like, this has nothing to do with Wireshark. And Wireshark wasn't even on my, you know, on the acknowledgement page. So I'd be looking, like, if we're going to scan a network, I'm looking for Wireshark. But when it didn't pop up, I was like, okay, that makes sense. That's why. So I would tell you, kind of focus on that, if that makes sense to anybody.
That's a good point.
Did that make sense?
Yeah, that's weird that you noticed that. But okay.
I actually read those things. Yeah, like 15 minutes, and kind of do a brain dump.
Right.
And I also, like I told everybody last week, if you know I think I got six simulation questions. 2 of them I knew right off the bat. They were easier to set up, but like that RAID one, I kind of waited, and there was a question about it, and it actually had how to set it up, like I said last week. So skip over them, don't waste it, because you guys know anything that takes time, you're gonna waste your time. And the first test, like, I got done right at the exact time. The second test, I had 15 minutes, and I thought I did good, and like I said, I didn't. I missed it by 1 point, but yeah, everybody says it's hard. I've heard everybody say it's hard, and I can tell you it is totally different than 401, or I had taken 30. I've taken every version of the test. So focus on the book. I know I said that last week, but focus on the book they send you. He writes the questions just like they are on the test. They're not identical, but the way they're worded is identical to the test.
Nice. That's definitely where you want to get your practice on. Anything that kind of simulates the actual format of the exam is definitely where you want to get your practice. Because half of it is just understanding what they're asking. And while he brought it up, let me give a piece of advice. Something I did yesterday, which I never do. But normally when I get done with an exam, when I get through it, I skip past the first performance-based questions, and yesterday I only had one. So there wasn't a lot of skipping going on. But, once I got done with my exam, I had about 82 questions. And I normally go back through. There's normally about, 4 or 5 that I'm not really sure about. So I'll just go with my gut, and then I'll flag it and then come back. Well, this time I went through the exam. I actually went through it twice. I went through all the way through the exam, and there was quite a few where I was like, I'm not sure. So let me flag it. And then I went through it a second time. And normally I don't change answers unless I know it's supposed to be changed. But for some reason I did yesterday. I don't know why. But I ended up passing, but not by a lot. So I don't know if changing the answers put me over or if it brought me down. But try to avoid doing that. It's okay to flag questions and come back. You definitely want to do that if you find yourself staring at any one question for too long. Just flag it and come back. Like you said, you don't want to waste time. But when you do come back to it, never change it. Always go with your gut unless you're sure it needs to be changed. Right? There's something, maybe you saw another question somewhere down the line and it reminded you about, oh, you know what, I picked Telnet, that should have been Shakir Shah. Or, I picked Traceroute, that should have been Ping, whatever. But just make sure that you always go with your gut, okay? You can live with that, but when you start changing stuff, and especially if you fail after you change a bunch of stuff, if you fail by a couple questions, you're always going to be asking yourself, what was it? Which one did I change that I shouldn't have changed, right? So don't do that. Always go with your gut. If you're on the fence about something, go with the one that you picked first, unless you're sure it needs to be changed, okay? What is that? I flag all the scenario based. Yeah, normally I don't even do those. I skip right past them. Because normally those are going to take more than a minute. So I skip past those and then come back to them after I've done the rest of the exam. But there are a few of them where you could do a matching one. If it's an easy matching one where they're match up these IP addresses or something like that, I mean, you can do it. But for the most part, I always skip past those and just come back to them. Partial credit. So we save those to go back to the end when you knew you had time. Yeah, exactly. And you don't even have to flag those. Once you get to the end of the exam and you hit next, it'll take you to your review, and then it'll say, all right, these ones, either you flagged it or you didn't complete it. So it'll give you 2 chances before it grades your exam. So just keep that in mind. I think we're about at the end of the session here. Any other concerns or comments? That was a really good review, by the way.
Hey, Tristan.
Appreciate that. Yeah.
I don't think I hit on it this time, but know your different types of certificates and why you'd need them. So I know I got 3. I think I said it last week. 2 or 3 questions on escrow keys, and each one was different. Why I would use them. And then the other one I got was setting up firewalls a lot. What rules for firewalls? You got to know how to do them, and that's in you certified too. So I'd say focus on that. I know some of those aren't worth a lot of points, but I felt like I got so many PKI and certificate, X501. They were over and over. I was like, I almost wanted to turn around to the test proctor and go, are you sure the test is right? Because I don't think there should be this many questions about this, but it continued. Like throughout the test, I get 2 questions on something, and then it go right back to a certificate-based question. And then I get a couple more, and then another certificate. It just seemed like it nonstop about certificates. And firewalls, setting up firewalls was on all the tests I'd taken. And I agree with you on don't change your question. I probably would have passed that second time if I wouldn't have changed, 2 or 3 questions. You're normally right the first time, or you're wrong totally.
Right. And those, yeah, it's always go with your gut. Definitely. Okay, so by the way, that was a good recap. Appreciate that. Hopefully everyone got something out of that. Okay. So it looks like we're about to at the end of the session here. Actually, some of those may be questions that aren't actually graded. Yes, she has a point. There's some. If you come across a question that just seems left field, like it has nothing to do with the objectives at all. I saw one of those yesterday. It had nothing to do with anything. Just take your best shot and then just keep moving. But make sure you don't end up staring at it, especially when it doesn't count. Okay. Crystal seems a little nervous about Security Plus because no other experience other than school. Took A+, but security is a lot. Yeah, well, believe it or not, A+ is a little experience. If you got A+ certified, you did get your introduction to security, so there's going to be some review here. You're just taking it to the next level, basically. Same with Net Plus. A lot of the networking concepts that you're going to see in Net Plus, there's actually a network security section there that kind of gives you your introduction or your baseline to network security there. So, like I said, they do tie in. Don't be nervous about it. Just prepare the same way you prepare for A+. Go through the objectives. Make sure that there's nothing in here that you don't get. And if there is something in here that you don't get, then find a way to figure it out. There's tons of training outside of the stuff that we provide you. And we provide you a lot, but there's a lot of other resources out there that can help you understand this stuff better. So if the stuff that you're using isn't working, then just find something that does. That's kind of what I had to do, and a lot of other people. Most of the people that have success in this program are the ones that are real resourceful. So they don't really depend on just what's provided. You find a way to make this stuff stick. So that would be my advice. Yeah, there's so much information here that no matter, it doesn't matter if you took a course or not, there's still going to be stuff here that you probably haven't seen yet. So, just make sure you do your homework on all of it. All right, I don't want to keep everyone too long. This was a good session here. Someone has a web question? Yeah, I have an answer. Never use web. There you go.
Hey, that was my exact thought, right? I was like, hey, there's no way on the 501 there's going to be a web question. And sure enough, there was. It had to do with an old system that only had Wi-Fi and what you should do. And I was like, you got to be kidding me. Get rid of the system. That's what was in my head. Time to update. But it wasn't one of the options. So I was like, and I think Jason had actually talked about it in the training, you could air gap it, or he gave like a couple of scenarios of what you could do. So pay attention to that stuff because it was on there.
Yeah, by this time everyone should know you shouldn't be using web. They stress that in A+, but who knows? I'm pretty sure they get somebody with that every once in a while. Okay, let me go through these names real quick. Oh, by the way, great session, guys. Next one will be tomorrow. Net Plus will be 1 p.m. Eastern. All right, we'll see you then.